$15 billion worth of rent gets paid in New Zealand every year, about half of that to property management companies. There's no rule that says that money has to go into any kind of trust account. It's completely unregulated. This is an industry that manages hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets for everyday New Zealanders. This is the wealth of the people in this country. Nobody else gets to manage $75 million worth of retirement savings without any regulation. And most larger property management firms, or those that really believe in the value of the service, will have a I think that the funding of growth infrastructure in New Zealand needs a rethink. I know that the government is looking at it. Go overseas and you realise how small New Zealand is and how fragmented the decision making can be around these things as well. Real estate people know what is happening and changing in the market long before it becomes a data point.
So is it the oldest profession, or is real estate the oldest profession?
Oh, I'd suggest that prostitution is probably older than real estate, David.
Okay, well, there we go. We'll just leave that for the comments section. Welcome to HomeRun. Our guest, Jen Baird. Now, Jen is the CEO of the largest real estate, or maybe the only real estate membership organisation in New Zealand.
Only one.
Yeah, Real Estate Institute of New Zealand. However, I first met Jen, she was heading up marketing at a leading real estate agency in New Zealand. And she's also worked at council. And I think the last time I chatted to her about her job there, she first found herself on the front page of the Herald having to bat away solicitation or something like that.
Yes, actually, it was the Waikato Times, because I was the general manager of both at the Hamilton City Council, and amongst the many different things that I was responsible for, the prostitution bylaw. And my mother still tells the story about how proud she was that the first time her daughter was on the front page of the Waikato Times. The quote from me was literally a definition of solicitation, because there was this argument about what solicitation was. And anyway, it's a legal profession, and every council has a prostitution bylaw.
So is it the oldest profession, or is real estate the oldest profession?
Oh, I'd suggest that prostitution is probably older than real estate, David.
Okay, well, there we go. We'll just leave that for the comments section. And Jen, in your current role with REINZ, so you look after both the team and thereby the entire real estate profession. And I keep using this word profession because I feel like real estate has changed a lot, but you've been around real estate a very long time. How have you seen it change? Is it good, bad, indifferent? What are some of the things that mark that journey?
That, like most professions over time, everything changes and nothing really does. That there's a lot that is really different to what real estate was like. I started in 2007, before all the listings were on Trade Me, before Facebook, which makes me feel quite old. But none of those things or those tools were available, but real estate was still getting done, and the way that we do it is slightly different. But fundamentally, real estate agents are still guiding people through a complex change in their life. Yes, there are groups of people and groups of buyers and sellers who are making deeply rational decisions about buying and selling investment properties, but by far the largest group of people transacting in New Zealand are doing so because they need to move into that school zone, or their parents have died and they're selling the old family home, or they've just come into that inheritance and they're upsizing their own family home. So they've made a life choice, and that life choice means that they now have to have a property transaction, and the agent is helping them through that life change. And so it's the people aspect of real estate that hasn't changed. The tools around it have. The way in which we engage with people has. And, some would say that society and therefore people have changed a little bit, but fundamentally the work is the same.
So I guess that work that's being done, what is the definition from your perspective of, I guess, a great real estate agent? What's good work in that space?
Oh, that's a great and impossible question to answer. Because one of the things that I love the most about this industry is that I've always called it the great equalizer. And, you can show up in this industry and have any kind of background you like. And if you're all prepared to do the work and put in the time and effort and learn how to engage and connect with people, you can be a great agent. And I would suggest to you that the best agents aren't the ones that have made the most money. But lots of people have a whole load of different versions and variations of what they consider to be the best. And the great thing about this industry is that you can be the best version of yourself. You can create what you would consider to be the best kind of business that suits your life. And everything in between. I remember sitting in the audience and watching this panel years ago and being completely gobsmacked by it. And on stage was a man who had spent a significant period of his adult life in prison, and a man who was an ex-surgeon who had moved to New Zealand in his 30s. And these two people were had made the same amount of money in the previous year in real estate, and it was a lot. And they could not have been more different. They could not have had more different approaches to real estate and to their businesses, and yet here they were being equally successful if you're measuring that in dollar terms.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you picked just kind of differentiating that success in real estate is not just the top agent. There's actually different hallmarks to that. Maybe that kind of leads us down that question of agents and how do you work out who the right sort of agent is for you?
What if I was choosing?
Yeah.
I've done a fair few deals, fair few transactions actually in the last few years, and it's always an interesting one for me. I think that occupational hazard, I'm probably the vendor people want a call from the least, which is interesting. But I can
just imagine this real estate agent sitting going, I really need some more business. And then the next thing is Jen Baird. What a compliment, though. If
I hope I don't get anything wrong.
Some of you may have worked with Jen, but
exactly. They fear that.
What are the criteria you look for?
Well, a good human. I might have spent the last 20 years in real estate, but when I'm selling my property, I'm just as emotional and just as disconnected from reality as every other vendor, right? There's a reason I'm selling this property and I don't want to own it anymore, and I need you to get me as much money as you possibly can. One thing, I'm going to give this away, but one thing I always do, I'll ask for a discount. I'll ask the hard questions. I'll challenge the method of sale, but I will always take the agent's advice. I feel like it's the least I can do, right? You're the expert, not me. And if I think I'm that great and know so much about real estate, then I have the opportunity to sell this property myself if I want to. And I have never done that because I trust the people that I give the work to.
That's quite interesting. So you're someone obviously with a huge amount of knowledge in real estate. And it's a little bit different than, the question from a layperson saying, should I sell the house myself or should I engage a real estate agent? But for someone in your position, I guess now politically being part of that organisation, perhaps you'd almost need to be seen to be using a real estate agent. But stepping aside from that, what's the reasons that you would do that?
Well, the reason I wouldn't ever do it myself is because I don't sell real estate day to day. I don't know what's going on. I don't have, a handful of people in my phone that are either, are looking for properties like this. I don't really know where to start. And then God forbid I'd have to have a conversation about price with somebody who doesn't value my fabulous home. I mean, I'm emotionally involved. I don't want to do that negotiation. I don't do negotiation in my job very much, but real estate agents do all of the time. That's the beauty of it. And they've got networks. I've got networks of colleagues who are bringing people through the property. They just know the stuff. I think too that when you sell your property privately, you don't have the protections that you have when you're using a licensed real estate professional in terms of the Real Estate Agents Act, but also just their kind of general ability to make sure that you are dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. Because if you don't know that all those I's are there, you're not going to dot them.
There's certainly a lot of risk associated to that, and it's from my experience in the industry, it's much easier to prevent a mistake than try and remedy it once it gets dry.
Yes. I think that one of my best experiences, which was just floored me, I was selling a rental, and so my tenant had moved out, and I had decided that I really didn't want to own this property anymore, and it needed a zhuzh up. And I thought to myself, oh no, I'm going to have to project manage this renovation. And I was at an event, and a real estate agent that I know said to me, oh, what property do you own? And we just started having a conversation. I said, oh, actually, I've got this rental property in it. I'm going to sell it at some point. And she's like, oh yeah, tuck that away. And she called me a week later and said, I've just been thinking about this property that you're selling, and what would it take for you to list that property? And I said, well, it needs a full renovation. And she says, okay, I can handle that. What else? Right.
That must be so handy at that time.
Well, that's all. She's like, okay, I'll get you a couple of quotes. Middle of next week, no problem. And that's the sort of thing I could never have done that myself. She took the hurdle away from me listing, and it made all the difference.
Wow.
It's a big thing where you've actually got someone in there who just goes, well, how can I help? And then they've got the skill set to be able to do what you need. And
the connections and all of that sort of stuff. She doesn't get paid for enabling that renovation to happen. She went out of her way to make this process easy for me. So, of course, I listed my property with her.
Yeah. And kudos to her, because she called you. Followed
Absolutely,
up. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Good. Yeah. A little bit about your real estate journey. What does that look like? You mentioned before you've engaged in a few transactions, and how's that sort of helping you? Are you involved in the investment side, or is it primarily residences?
Yeah, I have a couple of investment properties and a primary home, but I like to move, so I have moved a little bit over the last wee while.
Yeah. What would you say is something that you've learned through that process? Have you made any mistakes that you go back, actually, if I was going to do that again, I would definitely do this differently?
Actually, it was a conversation that I had with an auctioneer some time ago, and he was in the process of selling some units that he owned to buy a much nicer home as a rental property. And he told me that his biggest mistake was that he went for quantity over quality. And I dug around in that with him a little bit, and I thought, God, that's what I've done. That I've got these investments that I've got multiple investments, but they're quite low quality investments, and that means that I have to put a lot of time and energy into them. I'm always concerned that I'm going to get the phone call about hot water cylinders busted or whatever. There's always something more to do.
Can you unpack that quality piece a little bit? Like, when you say quality, what does that mean?
For me, it meant having to deal with things breaking and maintenance and those sorts of things, because that. I have a busy life. I just don't want to have to deal with that sort of thing, and it stresses me out. But also the capital gain on a nicer, higher quality freestanding home is better than it is on your townhouses and units and that sort of thing.
Yeah. In terms of that, I guess that management piece of it, and actually this is something where property management's kind of been a little bit under the regulatory lens, but is no longer. What's happened with that journey? What's your perspective? How's REINZ involved with that?
I love property managers. I've always used them. My partner decided once that he would manage one of the properties that we owned. And I was like, over to you, buddy.
How did that go?
I don't want to know about it.
Did you get him the tough questions?
No, I'm like, if something breaks and somebody needs to write a check for the maintenance, I'll do that, but I don't want them to. And that is why I have property managers, because they are worth their weight in gold. So property management regulation, something that the Real Estate Institute has been advocating for many, many years before I started the previous chief executive.
What's the reason they're advocating for it?
It's completely unregulated. So this is an industry that manages hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets for everyday New Zealanders. If you think about even a small one-man band type property management company could have, let's say they've got 100 properties. At the average price in New Zealand, $750,000, $75 million worth of property, $75 million worth of retirement savings of New Zealanders, right? Like, this is the wealth of the people in this country and their retirement savings. Nobody else gets to manage $75 million worth of retirement savings without any regulation. On the flip side of that, on the tenant side, $15 billion worth of rent gets paid in New Zealand every year. About half of that to property management companies. There's no rule that says that money has to go into any kind of trust account. You can set up a property management company and that rent can go into your personal bank account, or you can go into your bank account that you have full access to. And the opportunity for poor decision making around those sorts of funds is too easy. It's there, and we see it too often.
I was just going to say, it's almost a surprise that I haven't heard of more horror stories.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a week that goes by where there isn't something like this happening in the tenancy tribunal, like bonds not getting paid, bond fraud, those sorts of things. Most property managers do a remarkable job and are completely trustworthy. And most larger property management firms, or those that really believe in the value of the service, will have a trust account. They take care with their clients' money. They have P&I insurance. They're training their staff, all of these sorts of things.
I just got to say, this to me sounds like a little bit of a checklist. If you're thinking about getting a property manager, here are some things you should look for.
100%.
Yeah. So
100%.
Keep going with the list, please.
Yeah. Trust account, insurance, training of their staff, complaint process, codes of conduct, those sorts of things, and all the right documentation as well, right? I just think that it's a really important thing. So anyway, where we got to, the previous government believed in the regulation of this industry. It had been regulated, was deregulated in 2008, not included in the Real Estate Agents Act. And so the previous government wrote a bill and was in the legislation had its first reading in Parliament before the election. New government came in, not a priority for them. They were very clear fairly early on that they would not be progressing with the bill, which was very disappointing for us. And we have had many conversations now with all of the key people involved about the importance of this, the importance of protecting the assets, of the landlord, but also protecting tenants. And we're having conversations now about how might we add in some of those protections without the significant regulatory burden that some felt the bill would deliver. So light touch regulation, if you will. So look, it's got a long way to run in terms of being able to bring that to life. But I think that, most of the parties in Parliament now believe that there is room for some form of protection. What that might look like and when that might come into place might be in place is yet to be determined.
I can see, because of your proximity and hearing those stories week in and week out, that you can see why it needs to be regulated. And then on the flip side of it, and some of the things that we're going to be talking about in the podcast involve in actually, getting projects off the ground, for example. And with your background in council, do you think that there's over-regulation with planning, for example, in the RMA and that sort of thing? I know it's almost like the ethos of the current government is we need to cut red tape. And clearly in some places there still needs to be some guardrails, but in others perhaps it's become onerous. Or has it? What do you think?
I mean, if you take property management, for example, maybe 18 months ago, we counted up the amount of changes, significant changes to legislation in the property management field in the previous 3 years. And there was 27 major changes in 3 years in that property management space. It's a lot, and property management wasn't the only place where, those kinds of legislative change happens. And, picking up your point about developers and, the challenges with development these days, the the time and cost involved in developing now is really high. And what I saw through my time at council and post was the same thing happening. Just more and more and more responsibilities, more and more things that developers needed to provide to give some assurance that what they were building, where they were building was going to be fine. And there's a lot of risk involved for councils when they are consenting something, because they're saying, yep, we agree, this is okay. And when it's not, leaky buildings, all of the developers disappear, all of their companies disappear, and councils are left holding the baby, and they are still paying out for leaky buildings. It costs councils, and therefore us, right? Because councils' money is ratepayers' money.
Correct.
But they are the last ones standing. All of the risk falls to them, and when they get it wrong, it hurts a lot. And so we can't expect to put all of the risk in their pot and then expect them to make quick, subjective judgments. They are going to want to know that everything's in place. But I think that I would agree that things have gone too far, that there are too many hurdles, and that it is getting in the way of New Zealand being able to build quality homes at the pace that we need them. And we need developers. We need them to be building houses. We need them to be confident. We need them to be able to get funding, and we need them to know that they can, that they can get through a process and get these things built and sold and move on to the next one.
What would be sort of your take on encouraging more developers to kind of take that step? What would be the first thing you would do?
Wait for the economy to improve. I can't change that. Unfortunately, I can't change that. And developers are deeply rational. They're running the numbers, and if the feasibility doesn't work, the project is not going to get off the ground. It's as fundamental as that. And this is the challenge of these cycles, the boom bust construction cycles that we have in New Zealand. And every time one is coming along, we have these conversations with government about building through the downturn, and it doesn't ever really quite happen. And then we get to this point in the market where things are starting to pick up, and people might start paying some money, but it takes a while for developers and the rest of that ecosystem to be back to a point where they go, yeah, okay, actually now the numbers are working. I can line up my finance, all of those sorts of things, and get back into it. So
it's a mixture of that confidence and profitability puzzle, where they're confident there's not a risk of a downturn happening or it getting worse, so they can make the sales out the other side.
Yes, and it's not just the developer being confident, but it's whoever they're using for their finance. And that has tightened up significantly.
That's good. You've got a pretty good, very good understanding of all this stuff. What is are there any missing pieces to this, like that should, from your perspective, just seem obvious, but aren't being done by people that perhaps could do something?
I won't drag you into a conversation about infrastructure funding.
Oh, but I wish you would.
No, you don't.
Okay, really?
I think that the funding of growth infrastructure in New Zealand needs a rethink. I know that the government is looking at it, and it is really complicated.
I don't know the old thing, so maybe you could just, what would the rethink be, or what's the current, I guess, paradigm?
Yeah, look, there needs to be new options for councils and developers and funders to be able to recoup their investments over time. And it is a wildly complicated space, so I really won't go into any detail. But there are lots of options, and I know that the government is looking at those. But councils' balance sheets are under massive amounts of pressure. They are up against their debt limits already. Something has to give if we want to have developers and councils able to build the infrastructure that is going to enable the development of new housing areas and new business areas as well, new commercial precincts in New Zealand. So I think that's the thing we don't talk about in real estate, but I think it is so fundamental and happens way back here at the beginning of the system, because you can't sell a house if it can't get built.
Yeah, I mean, the
exactly.
piece where this kind of manifests at the pointy end of it is where you've got somebody who looks at something that the zoning says I can develop this further, but then when they go to do it, there's no capacity in the infrastructure.
Yes, and I mean, and that is just amplified when you're talking about a developer who wants to build 1,500 homes.
Yeah.
You know, and then they have to put in a wastewater system that is wildly expensive, and you know, they would say gold plated, but you know, and this is the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting where the conversation's going, but to me, this is like the short term versus long term thinking. You look at countries, and to be fair, they're much bigger countries with bigger coffers, but at the same token, there still does seem to be, in my short awareness, of what seem to be quite short-sighted decision making.
Yeah, I think a bipartisan agreement on a long-term infrastructure plan for New Zealand would be unbelievable. It would be great. You know, councils are required to have a 30-year infrastructure plan. They do 10-year funding plans, but we have these really short election cycles, and all this money and effort goes into planning for XYZ road, and then new government comes in and they're like, no, we're not interested in that particular piece of road. We're going to do this piece of road or this rail, or whatever our focus is going to be, and all that effort is lost, and that project goes on hold for however long until the government changes and they're back into XYZ road again. But having a longer term view, a New Zealand Inc. view, I think would be great. And we all go overseas, or those of us that are lucky enough to go overseas, and you realise how small New Zealand is and how fragmented the decision making can be around these things as well.
Yeah, so true.
I don't have a solution I can articulate.
No, it's good. I mean, and to be fair, I think it's a real interesting kind of social conversation to have. I don't know how useful it is potentially for people who are about to do something in real estate. Well, I would say I noticed the planning that does seem smart is where you can see there's kind of like the town centres like Auckland and the unitary plan. That seemed like a big step forward where they're actually trying to say, well, this is an area which we're going to see intensification in. But if you're someone perhaps wanting to land bank for the future, or I guess do well out of real estate, what sort of things should you take into account with infrastructure?
Oh, you mean if you're looking to be a developer? I mean,
or even just
people that are land banking, you're talking about large scale, sophisticated developers who've got planning consultants and legal consultants, and they know exactly what's happening. And when you work in a council, you've got planning. I mean, when I was at the Hamilton City Council, we were planning for 100 years. Like this is what the greater Hamilton area is going to look like 100 years from now, from a spatial plan perspective. So like even in 30 years, absolutely.
I'd love to see
exactly
a plan from 100 years ago and see how similar it is to it.
Well, 100-year planning is new.
Okay.
Well,
to us perhaps.
Yeah, and so every city, people who are developing, they know exactly where the new growth areas are that are going to be opening up. They're trying to encourage councils to make it this area over here that they own land in. Those sorts of things are happening all of the time. So I think for real estate professionals, being close enough to the developments at council and the plans that they have, so that where the new subdivisions are going to be and what that timing and trajectory looks like, is really good intel, so that when you're talking to people in your local area, you clearly know what's happening around town. But then you can potentially be a bit more useful for developers, or for people who are looking to, if I want to sell and move into that new subdivision, actually that this is how that subdivision development is going to roll out. This is when it's going to start. This will happen, and then actually we have to wait until this piece of road or this piece of water infrastructure goes in, and then this piece is going to happen. So that then enables them to make decisions about when they will sell their family homes so that they can afford to move into the new suburb. So I mean, it's kind of all joined up. Yep. It's all joined up. I think what's really interesting is that we in New Zealand love to talk about house prices. And, that is just the house price. is just the very, very end of a very, very, very long ecosystem that has enabled this house to end up on the market. And, we're very focused on what's happening, at that price level, but understanding all of the pieces of the puzzle that impact that. I find it fascinating.
Totally.
I mean, I've been knee deep in it for a long time. But, it makes a difference to your understanding of how we've ended up where we are with house prices.
Yeah, I've seen the REINZ house price updates and your updates in that space as well. What are the key things that you pay attention to? Why do you think those are so important?
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, the thing that I pay the most attention to is what real estate agents are saying, because real estate people know what is happening and changing in the market long before it becomes a data point in anybody's data set. I mean, the REINZ data set is the most recent, so we have unconditional sales. The other data sets around have got settled sales, and that can be, weeks or months later before they're getting all of that data. But the people that feel the market changing are real estate agents, because they're in it all of the time, and their phones start ringing more or less, or they just kind of notice a little bit more action in the auction room, or more people at open homes or less people at open homes, or all of a sudden those kinds of properties aren't that popular anymore. They get this sense of movement, and when we're really lucky, we get talk to lots of real estate agents all of the time, and you get a feel for it, right? Like once you've talked to a handful of people, and they're all starting to say the same thing, you're like, oh, hang on a second, this is not just in one area. This is a change that's happening. The market is moving.
So you're quite interested not just in the data points, but also in the anecdotal data, if you like.
It's the lead indicator.
Yep.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
interesting. Yeah. Your comment before about if you're going to choose a real estate professional, be selective, ask the tough questions, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then once you're kind of in the hands of that professional that you've chosen, you're going,
let them do their job.
Yeah. But I guess I'm curious, you've been involved around it, and in fact, I love your involvement at the auctioneering championships. It was incredible. Method of sale, what do you reckon? Is it?
Well, so like I said, I will take the agent's recommendation. So, I fundamentally believe in auction anyway, because why wouldn't you try and get unconditional money for your property unless you don't really want to sell it?
That's obvious to you, and it might be to others as well, but would you just hone in on that point?
Yeah, so I think the beauty of the auction, actually, let me start from the end. It is wrong to think that not selling your house under the hammer is a failed auction. What an auction does is it creates a sense of urgency in anybody who might be interested in that property. Because if you want to buy that property, you need to get all of your ducks in a row so you can put your hand up at the auction and buy it. And if you're the only bidder there, you might get it for a really great price. And if you're not, then you absolutely need your ducks in a row, because you've got some competition and you need to be able to go unconditional on the day. And a lot recently of auction rooms, properties haven't sold. There haven't been any bidders. Nobody's put their hand up. That happened to me in the sale of my most recent property. But what happens afterwards is that person who has needs to talk to the bank, needs the bank to approve a particular property. It's like, yes, I might be able to buy this property. And they write an agreement up with a finance condition on it the day after the auction. And so they have also got their ducks in a row. They can't buy unconditionally, but they've done enough to be able to try and buy that property. That's the beauty of the auction. In a market like this, you're finding out really quickly who wants to buy it, and then they're ready. They're ready either to put their hand up or to give you a conditional offer afterwards.
Yeah,
and every stat that we don't collect stats around auction success rates, but some real estate agencies do, and they make that information public. And every time I see it, listing your property for sale by auction, whether or not you sell it on the day or not, the stats show that you will sell your property quicker. So if you actually want to sell, auction has got to be the way forward.
Yeah, I mean, with the clients that I look at that stuff with, it's often a multiple of 2 in this kind of environment, sometimes even higher. But you're absolutely right. I think it's quite an interesting point, though, and I'm glad you led with it about, what is a successful auction? Well, one that helps make the property sell, but it doesn't have to be under the hammer.
No, it doesn't have to be under the hammer. It doesn't have to be under the hammer, and that's also the expertise of a great real estate agent, right? Bringing the market into the room, but then being able to have the right conversations and get where you need to get to afterwards.
So what was behind your decision to enter the auction competition?
I got peer pressured into it. You know what auctioneers are like?
They're quite good at that sort of
They
thing.
gave me a really, really, really hard time one night, like fully peer pressured me into it. None of them can remember ever having the conversation, of course.
You absolutely stuck it to them, seriously. Was
that you?
Sensational.
Well-
no, it wasn't. But seriously, Jen's call was incredible. By the way, if you're watching this, we'll find a link to it because she's phenomenal. Now she's groaning, but seriously, especially when you watch her in the context of the other competitors, incredible.
Thank you. I did put a lot of time and effort into it, it would be fair to say,
Competitive
because
much?
I was not going to show up to my own gig and be rubbish.
Yeah, it was very cool.
And also I know some people who, know what they're doing in that space, so I asked for some help.
You brought the fight to them.
Oh, yeah. I got quite good at counting cards. If you know, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to go back on that, the tough questions that you mentioned about asking those tough questions to the agents, because I think the listeners out there probably want to know what would be those questions that they should be prepared to ask agents.
Yeah.
Because some of them actually don't, and they'll walk in and the agents will do their presentation and they get swayed by it. But it'd be really good to know from your perspective, as to, given that you've sold quite a few properties, what are those common tough questions that you ask the agents?
I don't think I ask them tough questions. More often than not, they ask me tough questions.
Right, okay.
Like, what's your bottom line, and, how much would you actually sell it for? And if you had a grumpy price, what would that be? Those are hard questions when you're emotionally involved. Look, for me, I know a lot of real estate professionals, and so I pick the ones that I like and trust.
Right.
I'm just like anybody else. Show up, act like you know how to do your job well, build sort of trust and credibility with me. I think that for me personally, and everybody is different, and this is also like a skill that real estate agents have, is that what I need in order for me to trust you and list my property with you, and what this other person over here needs could be completely different things, and somehow you have to figure out what I need so that you can deliver it to me. But I look for, takes it seriously, shows up prepared, has covered all the bases, has thought things through, that sort of thing, rather than, I sell properties around here all the time, it's probably worth $500,000, and whatever. Maybe really experienced, but I think sometimes we forget when we work in real estate that the people that we're dealing with have not had a conversation about buying or selling a property for years. And you are having conversations about it every single day. You think nothing of signing up a contract for $1 million. It's like pedestrian, right? I mean, how many of those are you doing? You're doing them all the time if you're a good real estate agent.
Yeah.
For me, signing a document with $1 million written on it is a massive deal.
Absolutely.
And, if I'm also dealing with the death of my mother, that I'm selling her house, not only are we talking about a hell of a lot of money, I'm really emotional as well.
Yeah.
And so walking people through a level of detail and with a level of care that I think sometimes in real estate feels over the top can be really important. And so for me, when I deal with a real estate agent, I want them to take me through that process, because I'm not selling real estate every day.
Of course.
And I want to feel like you're going to hold my hand through this process. And, that's important to me.
And then is there is there an average number of agents that you actually see per property? Do you have a golden number that I'm going to see 5 agents make up my mind, or
No, I don't want to see 5.
whoever sweeps you up?
I don't want to see 5. I don't have time to see 5.
Yeah.
Actually, usually I just really like to pick one. But I have picked one in the past. And other times I've seen a few.
So picking one, what have you based that on? Is it just their repertoire and what you've heard about them, or very much the relationship you had in the past?
So 2 things.
Yeah.
I want to work with somebody that I like and trust.
Yeah.
That's really important. But I also want to work with somebody who is good at what they do. I mean, I don't think I ever listed with somebody who's like absolutely top of their game. I mean, in terms of like the most successful person in the area.
Right. Why is
I can't remember. Like, you don't have to pick my point is, you don't have to pick the top agent in order to get it done.
It's such a key point.
And that's good to explore, right? Because,
totally.
You're right. Because it's interesting, right? Because a lot of the agents tend to market themselves as the number one in somewhere. So it's always interesting to see like what your take on that. You don't need to get the top agent in the area.
I mean, the top agent's got a thing that they can market, right? I mean, if I was the top agent, I would be telling everybody too. A property that I sold years ago. No, actually, I was buying. I was at a conference for the company that I used to work for, and I'd been speaking on stage. There's 2,000 people at this conference. It's the cocktail party. Afterwards, this young man makes a beeline for me, introduces himself, says, "Hi, I'm Todd." And he said, if you're ever thinking of buying or selling property in Hamilton, you should give me a call. And he handed me his business card. He didn't know me. He didn't know that I was from Hamilton, that I was thinking about buying investment property in Hamilton. He had no idea.
Yeah.
I was stunned. I was like, okay, cool, great. Nobody ever does that to me.
Yeah.
He'd been in the business 3 months, and he literally just decided he was going to do it.
Good on him.
And we did many deals with him over the years, and so did our friends, because he came over and was confident. It was great. And we gave him a shot, and he worked so hard. And that's the thing about using a new person as well. Like, they don't have 10 other listings, and they are going to bust their gut to make sure they do a good job for you, because they really want to get up on the skis. They want a great testimonial. They want to get the success for you and for themselves so that they can get their career going. It's a tough gig. It's a tough business to start out in.
You're right. Yeah.
You're something that Jen said earlier about, as a real estate salesperson, you can really make the business optimize for what you want out of it, which is something that I love about the real estate profession.
Yeah.
But it's such an important point, I think, if you're considering choosing an agent, is to, I guess, cover off it. You shouldn't be choosing the top agent. Doesn't mean you shouldn't choose the top agent, but that's not the defining qualities. And you touched on it, and I think it's so important. You want to feel that you trust the agent, that you of course should check for competency and professionalism.
Of course.
But ultimately it's, do you like working with them? Can you trust them? Are they going to be the right person to actually represent you in the transaction? And that there's lots of good ones out there. So it's just a case of actually finding one that's a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And find one that actually suits you in your situation and can actually understand your perspective on things, right? Yeah,
or as a recommendation from a friend. There's a lot of that as well. And I think that, that is from a real estate agent's perspective, that's gold. Right? You've done a good enough job for me that when one of my friends is thinking about selling their property, I'm prepared to put my personal credibility on the line and say, hey, you should list your property with David Palfreyman. He did a fantastic job for us. He's awesome. That personal recommendation in a situation where you're selling a massive asset like this, it really, really counts. And the only way you do that is by doing a great job for that person. So every transaction counts for that reason. That's why over time you just get repeat and referral business in real estate, because that really counts.
That's what runs up, yeah.
It's really interesting because I think probably almost everyone who at least is engaged with real estate agents will have like their agent that they like and trust.
Yep.
But I know, in fact, I've got a friend of mine, as I say this, and yeah, he's pretty critical about real estate agents. I think, in fact, I'd go so far as to say he dislikes them actively. And yet he's mates with me, so go figure. So, but I'm interested to pick on maybe some of the things about real estate agents that, and I've observed some of these as well, like particularly agents who go in and overquote the value of the property because they're buying the listing. Yes. And maybe there's others that you're aware of as well. Like, what are some of the reasons that you think agents have got a bad name, and is it deserved?
Many, many years ago, a man who had been in real estate for a very, very long time said to me, the thing about being a real estate agent, Jen, is that you have to be comfortable in no man's land. Because if you're doing it right in an ordinary market, you're stuck between somebody who thinks they paid too much and somebody who thinks they gave their property away. Mm-hmm. And that, so you have got two people on the side of a transaction. One is trying to get this property for as cheap as possible. I mean, generalizations, right? Yeah. And somebody who is emotionally attached to an asset that they think is worth more than it probably is. This is like generalizations, but this is classic explanation of buyer and seller. Market. And your job as a real estate agent is to convince this person that they need to sell it for less than they want to, and convince this person to pay more than they want to. And neither of them are going to like you particularly much for that. But that's what the job is.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I remember I bumped into she's a oncologist actually. And she did not like real estate agents. We had a real interesting conversation, but she said something along the lines of, it'd be like me telling you that I'll sort out your cancer, and then turning around and saying, yep, I will, and it's going to cost you this amount of money, and then just bumping it up and adding more into it. And it's just like worse news and then worse news and then worse news.
But I would take that analogy and say that's like the oncologist saying that before they've had all the scans, right? I'm going to tell you, I'm the oncologist, and I'm going to tell you, yes, sweet as mate, I'll look after you. And then I get your scans back. Then I've gone and actually looked at I've tested this in the market. I've got some buyer feedback. We've had a few rounds of open homes, and now I've got some information about the actual situation. And actually, sorry, I didn't realise you had all of these lesions all the way through your lungs. We're now dealing with a different situation. That's a real estate agent isn't the market. Like they have a very good handle on what's happening in the market at any one time. But until you put that property on the market and say, hey, all you people out there, do you want to buy this house? And how much do you want to pay for it? Until you've done some of that, the agent doesn't have that real information today.
Yeah, no, very true. And certainly I would say, just from my experience running auction campaigns, if you haven't got a buyer on auction day, that in and of itself is not a campaign failure, but a failure would be to not have used those few weeks to get that real-time market research. So you can then make a good decision about how and when and what price to release the property for.
Yes.
Yeah. What else is happening in the industry? What else is REINZ advocating for? What are some of the exciting or challenging things that you're engaging with at REINZ?
Weird.
I know that's a big question.
Sometimes real estate agents can get a bit cult of personality, that it becomes all about me and my profile and how many people know me. And profile is really important, right? Like, people have got to know who you are and that you're in real estate, so that when they are thinking about selling, they're thinking about selling with you. But the thing that builds profile is sales. So actually, the more sales you make, the more profile you're going to have, right? And so if you work that back through the system, how do you make more sales? Well, you get more listings, right? How do you get more listings? You meet more people. How do you meet more people? You make more phone calls. So actually, like, your profile is directly proportionate to how many contacts you're making, how many phone calls you're making, how many people you're reaching out to and having real estate conversations with. And so if I'm talking to real estate agents, I'm saying, don't worry about spending hours and hours and hours getting this perfect photo of you and this perfect ad and sticking it on the back of a bus. Make more calls. Do the basic stuff. And I think that's That's the piece. It's the picking up the phone, or finding whatever way it is that you have to have more real estate conversations with people, because then they'll go, oh, this guy knows heaps about what's happening in the area. Oh, and you become a part of their thought process. It's about the whole thing is about those relationships. And I think with more and more tools that help real estate agents be out there are more and more ways for you to find an excuse to sit behind your computer and worry about your Instagram post rather than trying to find some people who want to have a conversation about real estate. It's not the glamorous, exciting, modern stuff, but it's the stuff that probably is going to drive a better real estate business for you as a real estate agent and enable you to help more people move on with their lives and make the changes that they want to make.
It's so interesting you say that, because to a degree sometimes, because I run a production company, so we work with a lot of real estate agents and we do the photography and the videography and try to glam everything up.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting to see how a lot of tools coming up nowadays tend to sometimes become almost like a distraction, because they feel like they need to do all of these things in order to have their presence.
Yes.
And you're so right that the ones that we see being successful are the ones that are doing those fundamentals, the basics, the calling, the contacts, the building the network, and then building up from that.
Yes, and if I'm thinking about my profile and things that I might invest my money in, if I'm like marketing myself as a real estate agent, I would be thinking about spending my money on things that create an opportunity for me to meet people, like sponsoring something at the school, or something where I'm going to meet more people, or have more of an opportunity to connect in a meaningful way with people who want to have a real estate conversation, rather than just something that people drive by. How many of those people driving by are in the market?
True. And also something that humanizes you, right? It allows you to be that human, have that interaction one-to-one. Yes. And that sponsorship, or sponsoring a school event, or sponsoring a local park event, allows you to do that, to really connect with the community and actually show who you are as a person, and then be in that network.
And I've spoken to so many real estate people who are so deeply involved in their communities. Real estate people across the country, so involved in everything in the community, sponsoring so many things, because these are the communities that enable them to have businesses. Correct. And there's a giving back aspect here as well. It's like, actually, I've helped so many people buy and sell in this area. Of course I'm going to sponsor something that supports their families, or the local school, or the local squash club. Of course I'm going to do that. I think that that not a lot of recognition happens around, how much real estate professionals actually really do actively and passionately support their local areas. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that. Because we tend to talk a lot of the agents when we talk about the marketing side of things, and 9 out of 10 times I go to them, think hyperlocal, think the area, that's the 4 or 5 streets that you really want to target, and just think about what can you do to be part of that community. That's great advice. You're right, there's a lot they're doing already, and they probably haven't channeled it in the right way to communicate that to the masses in terms of the tools that then they will use to advertise that. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because seems like I might be on the right track on that one. I think that's great. And make sure that your property marketing looks
great. Yeah.
Whenever something comes in my letterbox or my email that I think is not great property marketing, I'll always call the real estate agent and say, hey, I know you're trying to do a really great job for this vendor. Can I just give you a bit of feedback about what this piece of marketing says to me?
Of course you would be that.
You might not have realised how bad this thing is that you just put in my letterbox, but let me tell you.
I got to say though, I mean, if you're looking at real estate advertising, some of it is just so vanilla and so just the same. Yeah, I really tip my hat to the real estate professionals who are creative, zany, clever, just a little step above in that. And it's noticed in the community as well. Like I know in Waiheke Island, there's an agent there who I respect immensely, and her adverts are just a notch above, and it shows and people talk about it. So that's, I think, another way to raise your profile is have not all touch points are equal. They all might have the same size of footprint, but if it's better, it's better.
But also something that she's known for.
Totally.
She's known for that particular thing, and that's, you don't have to be known for everything. Like, she doesn't also have to be driving the fanciest car and, be selling the highest profile properties and whatever, or sponsoring every school or whatever it is. Just be known for one thing and keep doing that one thing.
Jen, what would be your dream car and why?
Oh, I don't have a dream car, but I would like a Maserati.
Ooh, which one?
Why a Maserati? Of all the that's good. Why?
Why not?
True.
Or an Aston Martin DB9.
Ooh, classic.
I just not that classic.
It just needs to be able to put the top down, right?
Not that
Top
classic.
down, like the ones that you see in the James Bond movies.
No, not that classic.
Okay.
No, like no, from sort of like 10, 15 years ago. I still see them and love the shape.
Oh yeah, you're right. They are
Top.
beautiful cars. What would be your question that we can ask the next guest here?
What is the most meaningful lesson you've had in the last 12 months?
Ooh, that's a deep one.
It's way better than the car.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
You should ask me a better question.
It wasn't my question. Who's which one? No, we're not going to say that now.
Well, that's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a great
That's a tough
question.
one for the next one.
Shit, we're going to spark some DNMs, mate.
I think that I'm sure Stephen sends those questions out beforehand because people just go,
Yeah, we didn't.
oh no, maybe they cut it.
I'm really
Pause.
careful.
they cut
I'm
it,
very strategic. I never send my questions more than an hour before the podcast.
Oh, really?
But sometimes it's probably good because then you're not overthinking the answers. It's always good to, if it's coming off the cuff, it probably feels a bit more believable than
It's true.
somewhat staged.
I just wish we'd recorded.
What is the most meaningful lesson you've had in the last 12 months?
Probably meaningful and proximity can be difficult. So I'm just going to go, I think it's probably the most meaningful, and it's definitely proximity. Like learning that no matter how unreasonable or unfair or how prodded I might be being by my environmental situations, that somehow making sure that I am totally able to center and just actually have the response that I can be proud of my response to it, rather than
Wow, that's a huge thing.
that's
to
a
do.
big lesson. I'm still learning it.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably the most
deep,
meaningful.
man.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's deep.
that's awesome. How about you?
Oh, for me, the last 12 months, it's been a big shift in sort of where we are today. Like putting all this together has taken us a whole year.
It's pretty cool.
But the biggest learning I've had is rather than sort of dealing with everything at once, just take bite-sized problems, have a problem, sort of almost like break it down into those little pieces that you can deal with one day at a time. So then you're not overwhelmed by it, and then you can celebrate the success off the back of it, and then it gives you a lot more enthusiasm to deal with the next bit. Rather than looking at it as a mountain, you look at it one step at a time.
Fabulous.
That's the way I look at it, and I feel like I'm a lot more successful in my head every day.
Wow, that's fabulous.
Jen?
Oh gosh.
Answering your own question.
answering your own question.
That is a good question. That's why I loved it.
There is not a thing that is going to come along that is going to break me. That actually, I'll take that, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and there is not a thing. There is no limit to how much I can carry, and it to bring the next thing. It's fine. Like I kind of got to the point where I thought something was going to come along, and then one more thing came along, and I was like, nothing's going to come along. It's fine. I'll take it. It's all good.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jen Baird, thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.